Welcome to History, students watching. We're going to begin by reviewing several of our states. Our first contestants are going to be Adriana and Jacob. We're doing the girls against the boys, seeing who can remember their states. Students watching, keep track of your score as well.
Kentucky.
Girls, next two.
Texas.
Boys, next two.
Alabama.
Students watching. Anyone. Jackson.
North Carolina.
North Carolina, boys have it. Gage, and our next girl, Amaya.
Alabama.
That's Alabama, boys have it. Carson, Emily.
Georgia.
Tie, both teams a point. Caden, Madison.
Pennsylvania.
Girls, next two. Devin, Morgan.
New York.
Tie, both teams a point. Presley, Lexi.
Maine.
Boys.
Texas.
Boys. Adriana.
Oklahoma.
Girls. Next two. Students watching. Anyone. Jimmy.
Kansas.
Boys have it. Next girl and boy. Arthur, Una.
North Dakota.
Girls. Next two. Gage, Amaya.
Nebraska.
Boys. Next two. Carson, Emily.
Minnesota.
Boys. Next two.
Iowa.
Boys. Next two. And Morgan, Dev.
Missouri.
Missouri. Girls have it next two.
Missouri.
Good. Let's do another one. Presley, Lexi again.
Arkansas.
Girls have it. Good. Jimmy, Carly.
Louisiana.
Tie, girls were, but excuse me, you are correct. Girls were a hair faster though, so girls have that point. Jackson, Adriana.
Michigan.
Girls, next two. Tyra, Jacob.
Wisconsin.
Boys, Aiden, Una.
Michigan.
No. Students watching. Anyone. Dev.
Illinois.
Illinois is correct. Boys do have it. Arthur, Amaya.
Alabama.
No. Students watching. Anyone. Morgan. Jackson.
Indiana.
Indiana, boys have it next two. Carson, Kathleen.
Ohio.
Boys next two.
New Mexico.
Girls were a hair faster next two.
Arizona.
Boys next two.
West Virginia.
Girls next two. Jimmy, Lexi.
Maryland.
Yes, boys have it next two. Jackson, Carly. Last question for this round.
New Jersey.
Girls have it. So let's take a point score check break. And we have 13 for the girls and it looks like 16 for the boys. And so we're going to continue seeing who can get the most points as we go through questions from chapters 24, 25, and 26. So our next two, Adriana, Jacob. What was the order signed by Lincoln stating that all slaves should be freed?
13th Amendment.
No. Students watching.
Emancipation Proclamation.
It was the Emancipation Proclamation. Time is up, so no points, but you are correct. Next two. So Aiden and Tyra. Who did Harriet open her home to after the war? Students watching? Anyone? Caden.
Former slaves.
Former slaves is correct. Arthur, Una, Adriana lights for us. Who helped Harriet find her way to freedom?
Quaker lady.
Girls have it next to Gage and Amaya. Harriet worked as a spy, scout, and nurse during what war?
Civil War.
Civil War. Girls have it next to. Tell me the state that Abraham Lincoln was born in.
Kentucky.
Kentucky. Boys were a hair faster. Caden and Emily. Tell me another name for the southern states.
Confederate.
Boys have it next to. Tell me another name for the northern states.
Union.
Girls next to. Speech written by Abraham Lincoln after the Battle of Gettysburg was the.
Gettysburg Address.
Girls have it. Gettysburg Address next to. What was Abraham Lincoln's nickname?
On state.
Yes. And Jackson Carly next to. What state did Abraham Lincoln begin to serve in government in?
Illinois.
Girls have it next to. So Jacob and Adriana. What was the president of the Confederate States, or who was?
Jefferson Davis.
Yes, tie both teams a point next to. Now this is what is the amendment in the Constitution that stated no form of slavery would ever be allowed in the United States? Students watching? Anyone? Una?
13th Amendment.
That's the 13th Amendment. Girls have it next to Arthur Una. Who said we are not enemies but friends?
Abraham Lincoln.
Girls have it. Gage and Amaya. How many years did the Civil War last?
45.
Students watching? Anyone? Emily?
4.
It was 4. Girls have it next to Carson. Kathleen. Who was the commander of the Confederate Army during the Civil War?
Robert E. Lee.
Yes, girls have it. Way to think, Kathleen. Kaden and Emily. Who did Robert E. Lee want to be like?
George Washington.
Tie both teams a point. Well done. Next two. Who wrote the saying, first in war, first in peace, and first in the hearts of his countrymen?
Robert's dad.
Yes, Robert E. Lee's father. Boys have it next two. What school did Robert E. Lee attend?
West Point.
Yes, you've got it. West Point is correct. Girls have it next two. Jimmy and Lexi. What job was Lee given during the war?
Soldier.
And a leader of soldiers is called a? Students watching? Anyone? Presley?
General.
He was a general. Boys have that one next too. What job did Lee have after the war? Students watching? Anyone? Emily?
College president.
College president is correct. Girls have it. So we're going to pause right there, and you may have a seat. Let's take a look at our score. It looks like we have 26 for the girls and 24 for the boys. So girls won by 2. Girls, you may give yourself a silent pat on the back. Today we're going to pick up on page 259. So you can open your history books to page 259. Readers come, you may come and get ready to read for us. As we continue reading about this time that America is divided, there's another person who plays a key part in our story. We talked about the Confederate States, the Confederate general, but who was the leader of the Union Army? Who was the leader of the Northern troops? On page 259, you're going to see his name, Ulysses S. Grant. We're going to find out more about his name and what it means and what some of the letters oftentimes stand for. As we begin reading, let's take a look at a couple words that we're going to come across in our story of Ulysses S. Grant. Read our first word for us, Deb.
Horses.
Yes, now smile if you have ever owned a horse. I see some smiles out there. Oh, I can tell lots of you enjoy horses. Well, we're going to find out that as Ulysses S. Grant grows up, he has a special talent and ability helping with training horses. Read this next phrase for us, Jackson.
West Point.
Yes, we've seen this phrase before, West Point. We know that Robert E. Lee trained there. Ulysses S. Grant also trained at West Point. And our next phrase, Morgan.
Mexican-American War.
Yes, and just like Robert E. Lee, Ulysses S. Grant fought in the Mexican-American War, and he learned several skills and abilities as far as helping lead soldiers and things that happened during wartime during this Mexican-American War. Our next phrase, Asa.
Union Army.
Yes, the Union Army was the side that fought for the northern states. Our next phrase, Adriana. Short E, and then in verse. Surrender. Surrender, good. Unconditional means without any conditions, and then surrender is to give up control of something. Our story now with Ulysses S. Grant takes place at the beginning of the time that we come to know him for someone who is good with horses. So let's read about how he's able to use those skills. Begin reading for us, Amaya.
A special gift. Look at Ulysses. He can make a horse do whatever he wants. It is true. The boy had a way with horses that even grown men admired. He seemed to have a special gift of horsemanship.
Great expression, Jacob. Iron fire.
Hiram,
I.
Hi,
Hi.
Hiram,
In banana. Hi.
Hi,
Rum.
Hiram. Ulysses Grant was born in Ohio. He was a quiet boy who worked on his family's farm, and his favorite chores involved working with his father's horses. He drove a team of horses as they plowed the fields and hauled wood to the house.
Good at training horses. Now, as he grows older, he goes to a military school and attends West Point. Let's see what he learns there and what he's able to use as he continues to use those military skills. Continue reading for us, Aiden. Training.
Training at West Point when Ulysses was 17 years old. His father enrolled him in West Point Military Academy. When Ulysses
In Crystal.
Ulysses arrived, his name was mistakenly written as U.S. Grant, but he decided to keep it. After 4 years, Ulysses S. Grant graduated from West Point as an officer in the United States Army.
You got it. Good speed on that last sentence. Raise your books. How was Ulysses' name changed at West Point, Emily?
Because it was mistakenly said as U.S. Grant.
Exactly, and that's going to come into play a little bit later as his reputation continues to build as a great leader in the Army. So he attends West Point, he graduates, he's an officer. Now what is he going to do with those military skills? Continue reading for us, Madison.
Next, Ulysses Grant helped with the United States by fighting in the Mexican-American War. Robert E. Lee also fought in this war. Both men fought bravely and skillfully and learned many lessons about war. These lessons would later help them both plan battles in the Civil War.
Yes, rest your books. So we have here Ulysses Grant serving in the Mexican-American War. What was something he learned during that time of war, Jacob?
Many lessons.
Good, including planning
battles.
Yes, including planning those battles. Where would the troops and the soldiers need to be stationed? How are they going to strategically place them in the best places for them to be able to win? Well, both Ulysses S. Grant and Robert E. Lee learned skills during this war. Let's continue reading how he is now chosen to help out on the Union side. Continue reading for us, Lexi, the Civil.
The Civil War. Mr. Grant left the Army and got married. During this time, trouble had been growing between the Southern and the Southern.
The O-U in South has a in country.
Southern
Yes.
and Northern states. And anger, the Southern states withdrew from the United States and chose their own president.
Not choose, but long O.
Their own president.
Okay. What's the word before their own?
Chose their own president. In 1861, the Civil War began.
Good. I like the speed on your last sentence. Jimmy.
Ulysses Grant loved the United States. He hated to see it divide. Feeling that the Southern was wrong, he decided to join an army again. He would fight for the North.
Yes, feeling that the South was wrong, he decided to fight for the North. So rest your books. As our country at this time is becoming divided, he had a decision to make. He's now fighting for the North. Let's see how his battles go. Books up, continue reading for us, Una.
Ulysses Grant gets a new name. Ulysses Grant fought bravely in the Union Army. He made wise decisions in battles. When he lost a battle, he remembered the lesson he would learn from his troubles and never gave up. A few months after he entered the war, General Grant led his men into Tennessee. Then he captured a Confederate fort. He did not stop there. He moved on to capture another fort. The Confederate soldiers fought bravely, but soon they knew that the battle was lost. The commander of the Confederate fort asked General Grant, "If we surrender this fort, what will you allow us to keep?"
Good smoothness. Tyra.
General Grant replied, "No terms except an unconditional and immediate surrender can be accepted." He was saying that the Confederates would have to keep on fighting or give up everything. If they wanted to surrender, they would have to keep up the fort and everything that was in it. The enemy chose unconditional surrender.
Good. Just read for speed. Good accuracy, Arthur.
A man who fights. Although General Grant fought in many battles, he did not always.
Jump back up to General Grant's answer.
General Grant.
Mm-hmm.
General Grant's answer made him famous throughout the North. In fact, the people from the North took off the first two initials
Very
of
close. It's a sight word, initials.
of the General Grant's name, U.S., and gave him the nickname Unconditional Surrender Grant.
Good accuracy on speed on that last sentence. Rest your books. How did Ulysses S. Grant get the nickname Unconditional Surrender Grant? Carson?
Because he said no terms except an unconditional surrender.
Yes. He refused to stop fighting until he received those terms, and he learned not to give up. So those letters, U.S., often are remembered now as Unconditional Surrender Grant. He was someone who was determined. We can also be determined when we have tough situations we face, when we have difficult things. Sometimes it's just learning how to do something new in arithmetic or learning a new skill. Are you determined like Grant was? Let's continue to read more about his character. Continue reading for us, Morgan. A man who fights.
A man who fights. Although General Grant fought in many battles, he did not always win. Once he and his men were completely surprised by a Confederate attack. During this battle, General Grant was asked, "What plans have you made for turning back?" He quickly answered, "None. I have only made plans for advancing." General Grant and his army finally won that battle. He won because he was not willing to give up.
Good accuracy, good speed. Stop and think, Gage.
Stop and think. It would have been much easier if General Grant had told his men to turn back instead of to go forward. and it is often easier for us to turn back from serving and obeying God. He wants us to go forward for Him. Will you turn back or keep moving forward?
Way to use that phonics, Jackson. Philippians 3:14.
I press towards the mark for the prize of the high calling of God in Christ Jesus. Philippians 3:14.
Good accuracy. So don't give up. Keep trying. Keep working. Some of those goals may be difficult, but with God's help, you can keep on going. So stay determined, just as Grant was. Well, now that he's been a commander and he's been serving in the Army, what happens after the war ends? Well, he's able to use his skills and abilities in a new leadership position. Let's read about it. Continue, Deb.
General Grant became commander. In 1864, President Lincoln made U.S. Grant the commander of all the Union armies. Other men had held this job before General Grant, but each man had failed. It would not be an easy task. Civil War ends. General Robert E. Lee bravely led the Confederate troops. They too were men who did not give up. The many years of the war had been the South very poor. General Lee's men had gone for days without enough food. Their clothes were ragged, and many men did not even have shoes. Some had no guns. There were not enough blankets or tents. Too many men have already died, thought General Grant. I will write a letter to General Lee and ask him to surrender. General Lee sadly read the letter. He knew it was hopeless to fight any longer. His men were too weak for hunger and sickness to fight. On April 9, 1865, General Lee met General Grant in Appomattox Courthouse, Virginia. General Lee had begun to surrender.
Good expression, rest your book. So at this time, the surrender takes place. It was during this time that General Grant showed graciousness and kindness, allowing the Southerners to keep their horses. And he also refused to take any of those men prisoners. So he showed kindness, even though he was the victor at this time. Later, General Grant becomes president. Because of his great leadership abilities, he was able to be used in these different positions of leadership because he had that good character, those good character qualities. Students watching, I want you to finish reading this page and the next page, and then if you have time and are able to, take out a sheet of notebook paper and write a letter to a soldier. Maybe somebody in your family has served in the Army, or you know of someone who's serving. Take time to write them. They need that encouragement, and that would be a good thing to do. So complete these pages for reading so that you'll be ready for our next lesson.